It is actually 10 o'clock, so we've got loads to get through this morning, and we're going to make a start. This is the second of 6 webinars that we're running over this year and next. And thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to interacting with you during this time. My name's Sarah, and I am one of the newest members of the leadership team at CPAS, in fact, the newest member. And until the end of August, I was the team rector of 2 parish benefices in Dorset. St Mary's was a larger church centre church, and then we also had a little rural church up the road as well. But then moved to CPAS at the beginning of September, so it's a delight for me to be with you today. For those of you who don't know CPAS very well, we are an Anglican evangelical mission agency, and we seek to resource church leaders to lead churches in mission throughout the UK and Ireland, as well as running holidays for children and young people and acting as patrons for nearly 700 churches. And you can find out more about our work if you'd like to, and Kirsty, who's with us to help us with the tech today, is going to just post a link in the chat so that you can follow up if you'd like to. We're going to pray in a moment, but before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Matt so that he can introduce himself.
Well, hi everyone. It's great to see you here. Thanks so much for joining us for the webinar. My name is Matt Hogg. I'm one of the leadership enablers at CPAS. And yes, today we're going to be looking at what leaders are doing to promote growth in their churches. And we've been busy interviewing a few church leaders to hear what they're learning, and we wanted to share some of that with you. And we even have some of those leaders that we've interviewed on this call today, and we're going to bring them back up at the end of the session so we can chat with them a bit more. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Sarah.
Sounds really fantastic. We're going to have a great hour together. So after we've heard from Matt this morning, then we're going to go out into some breakout rooms to share our experiences and insights. And then we're going to come back for a question time with those guests as well. So we'll finish probably at 11. But if you would like to stay on, then I think Matt will be available for some time after the session ends. So do stay on if you'd like to. So let's just spend a moment praying. I just recognise that many of you will have already done sort of 101 things this morning. And I just want to lead us in a few verses that will be very familiar, but just love us to take this time to allow the Lord to really speak to our hearts as we enter into the time we'll have together. And the verses are from Isaiah 43, but let's have a moment just to still our hearts before the Lord and allow him to minister his love to us through his word. But now this is what the Lord says. He who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Saviour. I give Egypt for your ransom, Cush and Seba in your stead, since you are precious and honoured in my sight, and because I love you, I will give people in exchange for you, nations in exchange for your life. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bring your children from the east and gather you from the west. Father, we thank you for those wonderful promises, those wonderful words that encourage us to remember who we are and whose we are. And we ask for your blessing on this time this morning, Lord. We thank you for this opportunity. And we ask that by your Spirit, you will instruct our hearts today for the glory of your name. Amen. I'm going to hand over to Matt now, and as I do so, do please continue to use the chat to put any questions or comments. If you put your questions in capital letters, then that will just highlight them to us, and we'll get to as many as we can during our time. Matt, over to you.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Sarah, and it's good to see everyone. Welcome if you've just joined us. I'm going to share my screen here, and just so that we can orientate ourselves. So yep, the theme for the day is what leaders are doing to promote growth in their churches. And one way or another, church growth is on our minds, whether that's filling out October returns for our diocese or reflecting on the difference between post-pandemic and pre-pandemic attendance, maybe through to working out how to make the most of gospel opportunities that present themselves in this time. And so church growth is something that will take up our thought space and prayer time. And that's why we thought it would be good to host a session on growth in our churches at this time, to spur one another on with the hope that God might encourage and strengthen anyone who's chosen to turn into this and to turn up to this webinar today. And I think it's worth acknowledging that it can be a challenging subject. There can be disappointment. We haven't seen the growth that we expected, perhaps. Or there can be discouragement. We're not seeing the kind of growth that another church down the road or in our network might be seeing. There might be some guilt. We say to ourselves, if only I tried X, Y, or Z, then maybe God would have shown up, and we bear the weight of our apparent failing as a leader. So there's all sorts of challenges. But then on the flip side, there can be also a bit of pride, because of my leadership, we're seeing growth, and that sort of pattern of thinking. And thrown into the mix of that, of course, we long to see growth, don't we, as leaders? And we long for men and women, young and old, to come to know Jesus. We work hard, we pray hard, we plan hard, and a lot of time and energy goes into seeing people grow in faith, people come to faith, and for people to serve the world around them because of their faith. The Church of England defines growth in a few different ways, in three ways actually. Discipleship, so thinking about depth. Also numerical growth, breadth, you might want to say, and then also reach, so service to the world or in the world. And I think that's really helpful to hold in front of us when we're talking about this subject of church growth: depth, breadth, and reach. And it's also worth saying that at the outset that there is no silver bullet for church growth. I'm afraid I'm not going to give you 5 keys to unlocking guaranteed church growth in your church, because it doesn't work like that. Of course it doesn't, because ultimately it's God's work. He causes the growth. And that's what we see in the New Testament. The body of Christ plays its part, but Christ builds the church. Or as the 1 Corinthians passage says, one plants, another waters, God causes the growth. And so, yes, there are things that we can do to promote, or that will promote growth and health in our churches. And of course there are, because God invites us to partner with him as he builds his church. Professor David Vos, who was quoted in the Anecdote to Evidence report, a few years old now, he said this: there is no single recipe for growth. What seems crucial is that congregations are constantly engaged in reflection. Churches cannot soar on autopilot. Growth is a product of good leadership, lay and ordained, working with a willing set of churchgoers in a favorable environment. So I thought it would be really good to chat with some leaders to find out what they are learning and what they've been observing. And as I interviewed them, I've identified 8 common themes that I've distilled from the way that they have led, which I thought might be useful to you as you think about growth in your own context and as you continue the ongoing reflection in your own place and in your own context. And there are, of course, more than 8 themes, and absolutely anecdote to evidence, leading your church into growth, national church development. They have all distilled different things, and so there's some overlap. But I thought, maybe we could look at these 8 things. We're not going to have time to look at all 8 things, but I thought I could show you all 8 things to begin with, and then we could look a bit more closely at 5 areas of leadership that I pulled out just by listening to these leaders. And I've captured some of these little snippets. I've recorded some conversations with these leaders, and I've pulled out some snippets to illustrate these headings, so we can listen to these leaders. And so these 8 things that I want to share with you come under these 2 headings. personal leadership and organizational leadership. So personal leadership, what kind of characteristics that I saw displayed in the leaders that I was speaking with. And then organizational leadership. What structure, process, culture did these leaders tend to implement? And then under personal leadership, these things: a vision for growth, that they modeled growth culture, and that they attended to their own spiritual health. And then under organizational leadership, this heading, they were involved in empowering leadership in their churches. They had a clear mission and purpose. They were creating space to experiment almost, and giving freedom for people to try things out. And then also nurturing a faith-sharing culture, and then finally a pathway for discipleship. These were some of the things that I heard as I was listening to some of these leaders. We're not going to, as I said, not going to be able to look at all 8 of these today, but I thought maybe we could just pull out 5. And we're going to look at a vision for growth, modeling growth culture, and then under organizational leadership, empowering leadership, creating space to experiment, and a pathway for discipleship. There's so much more that we can be said on all of these things, but I thought it could be good to look at just 5 of these things, just to spur your thinking as you continue your own reflection in your own context, as I said. So first, let's look at this topic, this theme first of all, a vision for growth. And in the anecdote to evidence report, again, a number of years old, but it said this: there's a strong correlation between those clergy who prioritize numerical growth and those clergy whose churches grew in numbers. And I spoke to a number of leaders, and actually all of the interviews, all the footage I put into a one video, which we're going to share with you later on, which you can go back to. But these are, again, just little snippets of the conversations. But so listen to Sue Cook as I spoke to her in my conversation. This is what she said under this heading.
I think to be healthy and to be living, we need to be growing, and that's in different ways. And so right from the start, when I came to this church and in my last church, I was really clear that's part of what I see happening in the church. And so very early on, we began to pray for it. We pray for growth. So we have a church prayer for growth, and we pray at our PCC meetings. We pray every Sunday. And the prayer for growth is for growth in numbers, in spiritual commitments, in our discipleship, and in the ways we serve our local community. And so we pray that all the time. And every Sunday before church, when we're gathering to pray before the service, we pray expectantly, and we always pray for the person who's going to come for the first time. And so we've just built a sense of expectation and anticipation within the team that we can and we will grow, and we are seeing new people coming, and we are seeing growth in our discipleship and in the way we're connecting with our community.
Okay, so that was the first thing, having a vision for growth. Second theme that I was hearing was modeling growth culture. And there's that old adage, isn't there, that it be the change that you want to see. And on our the CPAS Leading Evangelism Learning Hubs, we spend a whole term looking at this theme, model, because we absolutely believe that it is a crucial part of promoting growth and health in our churches. This is listen to Kate Wharton as she shared under this heading, modeling growth culture.
We're busy, aren't we, on a Sunday? And it's very easy before the service to be running around being busy, getting ready all the things you need to do. And we do have to do that. And it's very easy after the service to be busy, catching the people you need to catch and doing all that admin. But I try where I can to be available before the service and after the service, to catch new people, to see them, to say hello. And I want to do that because I want to do it. I want to have met them, but I also want to do it because I want to model it to other people. And so I make sure that I speak to people if they're new. I try to speak to them before the service. I try to say who I am. I try to explain a little bit about what's going to happen during the service. If it's communion, I tell them what that means, how they might want to join in or not. If they've got children, I explain what the provision is that day for children. And I also try to introduce people to other people. So that might be beforehand. Most likely, if I'm going to be at the front, I'll introduce them to someone who they could sit with, or who will kind of help them figure things out. And then again at the end, I'll try to catch them before they go. I'll try to connect them with some people that they can have a cup of tea with. And because I think it's really important, I think if the person's only met me and then they go and I'm not there the next week, or I'm busy, that doesn't really work. So I want them, even in that first meeting, to have met quite a few people. I don't want to, you know, overwhelm them, but I want them to come back the next week and think, I recognise that person. And of course, we've got some people who are super good at that, and I'll try and find them. But it's something about showing other people what that value is. I never want somebody to walk into church for the first time, sit through the service and leave again and have not spoken to anybody. That would just be the worst thing.
So having a vision for growth, modeling growth culture, and then thirdly, this theme, empowering leadership. And it's something I love doing in my own church when I was based in Fulham, was giving leadership away. Craig Groeschel, he said, if you delegate tasks, you create followers, but instead delegate authority to create leaders. And as I spoke with Gary Owen, this is some of what I heard him describe. So listen to this.
The Church of England tagline is to be a Christian presence in every community. So the vision was really to try and create a Christian community in each parish that would ideally meet every week, to worship together, to pray, to grow as disciples of Jesus, and to reach out. So around here, there's not enough clergy to kind of lead a service in every church every week. So the vision was for the clergy and the leadership team to support the Christians who live in each parish to be the church in their parish, and say to them, look, come on, you're the Christians, you're the people God has placed in your parish. We'll support you, we'll help you, but you get on and be church and grow a Christian community where you live.
And then this was some of the result of what he just described. Listen to this.
So one of our churches, 2 or 3 years ago, we can't even remember how many times a month they were meeting, but it certainly wasn't every week. And a good week would be 5, 6 people, maybe 7, kind of in a little side chapel thing in the church. And over the last couple of years, and I hasten to add, this is the church where I've probably done least. It's just been my job to tell them they're wonderful and say yes to the things they wanted to try. A little bit of kind of support and stuff. But this church has grown now to they're regularly kind of 15 people on a Sunday, sometimes more. They've set up a pastoral visiting team. They've founded some youth work. Some of them are helping with an Alpha course. So there's been a little bit of transfer growth, I think, from surrounding churches where there isn't a service every week. People have kind of wanted church every week, and they've come into this church. But also we have seen people coming back to church, people who maybe they were kind of a Christian or some kind of Christian background, but their faith has come alive, and they're now kind of motoring in their discipleship. So that's been really good to see. So there's all sorts of different types of growth. I think a bit of numerical growth, definitely some growth in discipleship, people growing into leadership. It's just been really, really exciting to see.
Great to hear from Gary. And then next theme was space to experiment. And I described that because that was how I described it when I was leading a church. And you know, people would come to me and they had this idea for whatever it might be, and I said, well, let's give it a go. Let's see how you get on. And so I found it was much more colourful, exciting, just to see what ideas people came up with, and giving them space to experiment, and we could feedback, and then reassess how things were going. But listen to this as I spoke to some of these leaders. Here's Wally, who's going to share. See if you can listen to how he gave space for people to experiment in his own church. Listen to this.
I guess in hindsight, there were some key steps that we took, but in the journey, it did feel like very, very accidental. But I guess, you know, we're honestly trusting the Lord step by step. I mean, we're trusting in his guidance step by step. So basically, the way it happened was, it started off with our team having like a series of confirmations and prophetic words about us planting into London. And I think as a team, as a core leadership team in Leicester, we were discerning it. I think my final confirmation came from a student that basically said to me, she was a student in my small group, and she said to me, she said, well, I couldn't concentrate in my lectures today because the Lord was keep on speaking to me about imprint planting into London. And she had no idea that as a team, we were discerning whether God was actually calling us to London. And that was like, when she told me that, I was like, okay, God, you're definitely in this and stuff. Let's try to do this. So as a team, we basically met, and we asked the question, okay, what does it look like? What would it look like for us to partner with this prophetic word about London? And as a congregation, as a church, we have something called like gospel musicals, which are like evangelistic theatre productions. And it will normally bring like quite a few hundreds of people and stuff. But we've only ever held it in Leicester. So we decided that later that year, we'll experiment, we'll take a risk and do one in London. And we did one in London, and it attracted like 300 people. And we did it within the city. And out of people who attended that theatre production, we met people of faith, people who were interested in growing in their personal discipleship, and those who were actually quite unchurched or even apathetic towards church and falling out of church. And we developed like a small group for city workers, and that grew each week, where basically literally a year later, we had a strong enough core to plant a Sunday context, a full-blown church community. And honestly, especially being a church plant of only, when did we start receiving that word? I think 8 months after our church plant. We thought it was crazy. And we honestly, at first, we didn't have the faith for London. But after all the countless prophetic words, we're just like, fine, just to be obedient, we'll try to do something and see what happens. And yeah.
What if
I'm going to miss that one out just because of time. You can catch up on all of these videos. We'll send the link at the end. The final area, the fifth area, was having a pathway for discipleship. As I listened to these leaders, each of them had in different ways a pathway for discipleship. Listen to a couple of clips for this last couple of minutes. Here we go.
A guy called Neil, who is creating a missional youth church in a big estate on the east side of Leeds in a deprived area. And he's ended up gathering young people at years 5 and 6, late Friday afternoon, and then teenagers into Friday evening through schools work. But because it's a cost of living crisis, and because there are often young people that are not eating a lot of food at home, the food bank gives them a lot of food, and they do everything with food. And of course, we see in the Gospels with Jesus that doing things with food is a great way to build community. And Neil himself is creating a space, getting ideas from the young people of the things that they want to do. And slowly he's sharing the gospel with them. And that's led to a faith exploration group on a Sunday, again, based around food.
And then Chris Rogers under the same theme, a pathway for discipleship.
We were thinking a few years ago, how do we make sure that an individual that comes into the church can go from 0 through to essentially planting a church? How do we take somebody from a first contact all the way up to leadership capabilities? Now, you might say, Chris, not everybody has that call in their lives. And that's perfectly fine. But we need to make sure that there's a pathway there for those that they are called to. So we developed something which I printed out here on a bit of a sheet of paper. It's called the discipleship pipeline, and it was just a tool that we used as a church to ask ourselves the question: is there something on every run of that ladder that would allow an individual to go through a discipleship growth process? So the ladder starts with first contact. What do we do in that sense of first contact? Mums and toddler groups, food banks. And then the next level of the ladder is what I call deeper contact. What are we doing that takes somebody from being in the food bank to having a deeper relationship? The next step then is faith sharing. What are we doing there that is doing that evangelism piece, that faith sharing piece? Post sharing faith as hopefully is a conversion moment. And so the next run of the ladder is the one that many churches miss out, and it is what we describe as faith foundations. It's the new faith. What do I believe? What does this look like? How do I understand the impact of Jesus in my life? So that next run of the ladder is what we call faith foundations. The next one is then more around the ethics stuff. So it's around Jesus living. How are we helping people understand how they live for Jesus? The next run of the ladder is then what we call Jesus reproduction. And that isn't about having babies in the church, but it's how are we reproducing what Jesus is doing in your life, in somebody else's life. So it's moving somebody from consumership discipleship to making disciples making disciples. And then the last run of the ladder is around leadership. What have we got there to help people grow in leadership?
So there you go. These 8 themes, we looked at just 5 there under these 2 headings, and Sarah in a moment is going to put us into breakout rooms, but I'd love it if you could just take a moment, just take a few seconds to reflect on those different themes and see which one maybe God has been highlighting to you today, and we'll follow that up in the breakout rooms. But thanks so much for listening to that. Hope some of that was useful. I found it really inspiring chatting to the leaders. We've got some of them with us on the call today and that will join us at the end of the breakout rooms. But Sarah, over to you.
Okay, so let's just take that moment, shall we? And let the Lord inspire our hearts with what we've heard. Okay, you may want to put some time in your diary over the week ahead to just continue to ponder on that, and perhaps some of the conversations that you have in your breakout rooms will also just begin to spark more of what the Holy Spirit's saying to you today. So we're going to give you 12 minutes in a breakout room for an opportunity just to reflect on what we've heard. There's some just really inspiring stuff there, and we're going to put some questions in the chat for you to reflect on. Sometimes you might find it a little bit awkward as you get started in the breakout room. So we suggest that you quickly appoint someone to kind of steer your conversation and keep you on track. And don't hold back, dive in and get engaged with the questions that we'll give you. And take a moment just to introduce yourselves and then use those questions as conversation starters. When we come back together, we're going to have an opportunity to explore some questions together with some of the speakers that we heard on video this morning. So do know what you would like to ask when we gather back together. All right, so Kirsty, if we can go into those breakout rooms now, that would be great. And we'll see you in about 12 minutes.
Welcome back.
Yeah, great to see you all back. And at least I hope we haven't lost anyone in cyberspace. And hope you've had a really interesting and productive conversation in your breakout rooms. We're going to have a bit of opportunity for some questions. So if you've come out of that conversation with questions, do post them in the chat in capital letters so that we can get to as many of those as we can. Just a couple of things that went up in the chat before we went out to our breakout rooms. David Voss, no, it's David Both. So I think that's V-O-A-S. Is that right, Matt?
Yep.
V-O-A-S was the person that Matt referred to from the report From Anecdote to Evidence. And somebody asked whether a copy of that ladder that Chris Rogers shared would be available. You can get that on the Making Disciples website. So I hope that's hopeful. Matt, I'm going to hand over to you now to introduce our guests here.
No, yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, as questions, feel free, please do post questions up in the chat and we can field them in this next section. But just would love to welcome up to the stage, as it were, Kate Wharton, Vicar of St Bart's Roby, Gary Owen, Team Rector of Two Rivers Mission Community, and Andy Milne, Director of Missional Youth Church Network. And I term practically how that works. I think they just need to unmute themselves. And it's great to have you guys with us. Thanks so much for joining. Quick question just to launch things off, and then we'll be looking at some of these other questions in the chat. But just thinking, post-pandemic, it does feel a bit of in many contexts, many places, it's sort of a starting from scratch again in some ways. And whether that's the case in a certain context, or for someone who's moved to a new context and just thinking about the first steps, thinking about this idea of promoting growth and partnering with God as you know, in making disciples. What would you say would be a good first step? How would you approach it? What would you do? So Kate or Andy or Gary that might be here today, who wants to kick off?
I think
Andy, yeah.
Just to say, during the pandemic, so much youth work was just wiped out. It was and so many people have had to restart from scratch. And so talking to lots of youth workers and youth advisors, a couple of key things we found was, one, obviously prayer, enormously important to root everything in prayer when you're rebuilding, because mission is God's thing and we're trying to join with what God is doing. And we were saying to a lot of people, we found ourselves hearing from other people to take things step by step, value the day of small things, build relationships with people, and try and build community in very small ways initially. And that tended to be the starting point. And then from there, conversations about God and conversations about church and people linking in with church seem to come on from there.
Thanks, Andy. That's great to hear from you. And Gary, are you around? Or Kate?
Yeah. Sorry. Hi.
Gary, hi.
Tell me the question again, Matt.
So you know, first step, if you're in a context where, and you maybe just new into that context, you just moved to a new parish or benefice, or even just for broadly, you know, generally post-pandemic, we're in this situation where it does feel like you know, we're starting from scratch in many ways. And how, you know, if you're in that context, how would you approach this topic? You know, first step, how would you approach it?
I think that's really. I think you got to kind of pray. You got to see what the Lord's saying. But I would say, do something. It's better to do something than nothing. So I don't think you can go too wrong if you try sharing Jesus or try and encourage someone in their Christian faith, or do something and see what's kind of going on. And I do think you've got to trust other people and trust the Holy Spirit. You know, as leaders, we're not the first person in. You know, I look at the board of rectors in our churches, and they go back 500, 600, 700 years or something. You know, God's perfectly capable of looking after his church, and there are plenty of other people in the church other than the leader. Trust other people. Let the Holy Spirit work in them and through them. And I'll stop there.
That kind of links into one of the questions, Matt, that's come in, sort of that entrusting other people with leadership. So Debbie and Penny have both said that they'd be interested to hear about experiences of empowering leadership and giving leadership away. So maybe that's something that one of our visitors can address. Kate, are you around for that one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it follows on in a way from the last question, which was, you know, the first steps. I was going to say, pray, do some things where you gather together, and remind people of your vision, remind people of who you are, what you are as community. And I think, you know, the leader thing, it comes out of that, doesn't it? You know, some people have, you know, obviously kind of got leadership skills. We've got a woman who joined us 4 weeks ago, and already now she turns up early and sets everything out for Tots Church. Like, I feel like she might be a future leader. But not everybody's like that. And of course, as we all know, lots of people have stepped down. But I think that desire to lead comes out of buying into the vision of what we're doing. So for me, a lot of what we've been doing lately has been about reminding people of some of our core values. This is who we are. This is what we're about. This is what matters to us. And trying to get people to sort of catch that vision, and also not being afraid just to approach people individually. You know, we can kind of often give an appeal from the front. That doesn't always work because people don't actually ever think it means them. But just being able to approach someone and just saying, I see this gift in you, would you try this? Yeah, really helpful. That's great. Thank you so much. There's another question here which I think is really interesting. Can somebody say a little more about planned, visionary versus experimental or accidental mission and growth? It's very interesting because I think there's something here about kind of where
the work of the Spirit come together with the leader's role. So that say something about planned visionary versus experimental, accidental mission and growth.
Yeah, I just say I once was in a conversation with our local bishop quite a long time ago, and he always said to me, he said, Andy, he said, if you don't have a plan, he said, if you don't aim to get to a certain place, you'll certainly reach your target.
Yes.
I had to think about that for a while. And then he kind of explained, he said, if you aim up here, you might only reach here, but it's better than reaching nowhere. And so I always took that as a very simple way of saying, yes, it's good to pray and discern a sense of vision, a sense of plan of where we're aiming to go. But then on the other hand, you have to, every context is different, isn't it? And we only really understand the context by listening as we connect with people in our area, in our church, and starting to take small steps in mission towards that vision. And then inevitably, we're going to, the path as we go towards that vision is going to adapt slightly and change as we work with people as we go along. So I think it's holding the two things in tandem, which can feel very challenging to faith at times, because we most of us like things to be ... But that's, I guess, where we have to trust God that he's in control.
Yeah. I love the fact that Jesus always, he didn't have a kind of, these are the 5 steps. You know, it was different with every encounter, wasn't it? And he's just led by the Spirit. That's just really good. Thank you. There's another question here. We're moving through them quite quickly.
Sorry, sir. Kate just put her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Kate.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Andy said. I was just going to say, like, when I reflect on our growth over the last little while, it kind of mostly feels accidental. It feels like, well, how did that happen? Someone just saw us online and turned up, or they were walking past and they came in, or a friend invited them, or but actually, I think the reason that accidental growth works is because we have that expectation that was talked about earlier. We have that culture. So when somebody feels okay to bring their friend along because they know that they'll be welcomed, or the person who happens to see us online hears us talking in a way that suggests we'll be welcome. So although a lot of growth might be accidental in quotes, setting that culture and doing that prayer in advance means that it then embeds, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, that those sort of cultural changes just really underpin a lot of this stuff. So we've also a question here about suggestions for practical and engaging ways to encourage congregations to pray for growth. And Karen says she loves the thought that every meeting is a prayer meeting, which I think our first speaker mentioned. Who'd like to take that one? Gary, would you like to start there, or sorry, just
yeah, that's something we've definitely got to work on. That's something I was thinking of as a result of this this meeting. We've kind of been thinking about it a little bit before as well. But I do think, yeah, you just have to model it, and if the leader's doing it, then hopefully other people will sort of follow along, and people learn by doing. And you know, what I learn from what I've seen in other leaders, and hopefully I can model something for other people to follow, and then it just becomes part of who we are, part of our culture, our identity. So I don't really have any bright ideas other than I think we've got to do it, we've got to model it if we're a leader, and hopefully we can bring other people along with us, and then they'll do the same. It sort of cascades on.
Yeah. Again, it's a sort of cultural thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Often we might say things are more caught than taught.
Yeah.
And giving people an experience like that, people get to catch it, don't they?
Kate or Andy, do you have anything to add on that?
Just the thing of, if they're within the local community, if there's schools, if there's community places, practical places that people from the church know and engage with at some level, if we can pray for those specific places as well, it perhaps earths our prayers with the people we're actually trying to reach.
Yeah.
And maybe just adding in as well, just the more opportunities you can give people, I guess the better. So join in with different things that are going on. And you know, there was an initiative to pray every mile around the southwest coast path. So some of us went off and prayed, you know, on the coast. And there's Thy Kingdom Come, and there's loads of opportunities out there. Just join in, and people might not do one, but they might do the next, and then they kind of, oh, you know, that was good, and they'll try the next thing. So it's creating as many opportunities as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. Kate's added that the importance of celebrating good things and giving opportunities to share those good news stories that really encourages those in the church and reminds them to continue praying about growth. And Kylie's put a lovely idea in the chat there as well that they've tried with printing those postcards with a Bible verse and image on one side and then suggestions of how to pray on the other. I think that's a great creative way to pray. Have we got time for one more, do you think, Matt? I think probably.
I think we do, yeah. There's one earlier on. There's that one earlier on about from Gail. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, so Gail's asked, how do we deal with nostalgia creatively, meaning where people tend to rely on strategies for growth, which may have been effective in the past, but may not be right for now? And I think there's been a little bit of conversation happening around that question, but I wonder if there's any wisdom you can share with us on that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got much wisdom on it, but when I know all churches do this to an extent, but my church here is particularly prone to this thing and it's not, they're not doing it in a grumpy way. They're not going, we tried that once, we don't want to try it again, but it's always like, and they used to be a very, very big church and it isn't anymore. And there's always this tendency to say, oh, do you remember?
Yeah.
And my first or second annual meeting here, I played the song Do It Again. And I spoke about the fact that actually we're looking forward. God's a God who is moving forward. We're on a journey forwards. And it's really fine to look back, but we look back in order to celebrate and say thank you. And we do it in order to pray that God would do that thing again. So that thing was great in the past. Thank you, God. Please do it again. And so to kind of turn that into a prayer. So that doesn't necessarily help with the practicalities, but it's just like a mindset shift, I think, for the church. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
I think just telling stories as well of the new things that are happening and giving thanks to God as well for them. And, you know, I know you've got to be a little bit careful with that because sometimes new things are fragile. You don't want to over emphasize, but if key people in the congregation start to just hear the stories of the new things that God's doing, then some of the teaching and prayers can be linked to that. Hopefully it'll redirect the focus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my training incumbent used to have a saying where he'd say, don't pull up the seedling to have a look at how the roots are doing. Just thinking of kind of the fragility of new things, sometimes just allowing them that space and time. But stories are so powerful, aren't they, in helping our congregations move on these things. Yeah. Well, our time is rapidly running out. I can't believe how quickly that hour has gone, but thank you so much to our guests and for all of your input and helpful ideas. And thank you too for all of you for engaging and participating in the chat and during your breakout rooms as well. In a moment, we're going to give you a link to a resources handout. But before we do that, this is a CPAS webinar, and we would be so grateful to get your feedback. Which will take about 2 minutes, but it will just really help us to make sure that any future sessions like this can be of maximum use to people. So I think, yes, thank you, Kirsty's put the link in the chat. So if you just click on that now and complete it now, that would be wonderful. We'll give you a couple of minutes for that. Okay, that was a couple of minutes. If you haven't had a chance to finish, then please continue that later. But thank you so much for those of you who've just completed those forms. And the resources we've mentioned throughout the webinar and others are all listed in the resources handout, which is available for you to download. And again, I think Kirsty's already one step ahead and put the handout link in the chat there. So do click on that so that you can access that and get some other sort of great ideas. For those who would like to stay on the conversation, we're going to be able to be available for about 20 minutes after the session. So do stay on if you would like to have more conversation around our subject today. But I'm going to hand over to Matt now, who's just going to close our time together with some prayer.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thanks so much for hosting us today, Sarah, and thank you for the speakers who've given up their time to be interviewed and recorded, and then so the three of you to join us today as well. Really grateful to you. I thought I'd finish with this prayer. It's leading your church into growth prayer, and it was even posted in the chat earlier on by someone. And I thought it might be a great way for us to to close in prayer. Let me pray this for us, and then we'll close. God of mission, who alone brings growth to your church, send your Holy Spirit to give vision to our planning, wisdom to our actions, and power to our witness. Help our church to grow in numbers, in spiritual commitment to you, and in service to our local community. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Do follow up that resources handout. We'll be in touch as well with an email later on. On that resources handout, there is a link to the whole footage of the interviews I had with the speakers. So do follow that up. There are other books and other articles and things on there as well. But God bless you. Thanks so much for coming along today. Like Sarah said, if you need to dash off, feel free to do that. But if you want to hang around, if there are any more conversations you want to have, I'm going to be sticking around. Thanks, everyone. God bless you.
Thanks. Great to see you all.
Matt, can I just ask, I thought Kate's comment about it's very tempting to try and have a look at the roots of seedlings that you planted, sort of builds on one of my thoughts earlier. Really, what are your thoughts on that, and how we don't dig up to have a look at the roots, but we do learn what's working and what isn't?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Sarah, was that you who mentioned that?
Yeah,
it was.
It was one of those little kind of, my training incumbent used to just drop it into conversation from time to time. And I think it is just allowing things to have time to begin to get established before you start trying to dissect whether or not they are effective. Yeah. And just recognizing the fragility. Actually, when during the breakout rooms, Matt and I were just having a quick conversation about valuing the small things sometimes as well, and how we can be tempted to think, oh well, there's only 4 people signed up for Alpha, and so what's the point of running it? Whereas actually that could be just the sign of a small growth, and really, a fundamental importance in the lives of those people who come along, their opportunity to hear the good news. So I think it is about valuing the small things, but also allowing things space and time to develop before, not being too hasty to kind of think, oh well, this isn't working, and throw in the towel. Does that make sense?
Well, it's good to see some people here. If you're feel free to unmute. We've got about, how many we've got? We've got about 20 people here, so feel free to unmute if you want to do that. If you want to have a chat, if you want to share any reflections from your own context. This is just a few things that we share, but you will no doubt have lots of things you might want to share as well. Yes, someone's hand was just up. John.
Yeah,
Hi, John.
Yes, I can't find the how to put your hand up on this thing at the moment. But anyway, just to follow up what you were just saying about Sarah, about giving things.
We've just lost you, John. I don't know what's happened there.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. There you go. You're back.
Okay, we started a new service in January, I think it was. We were going to run it for sort of 3 or 4 months to see how it went, and we've kept on, extending the time, because it's an intergenerational service. It's without a sermon as such. There's sort of a little introduction, and then we go into, people just choose a zone to develop. They can either chat with others, or they can draw something, or make something, or sit on their own with commentary or whatever. There's different options that people have, and it was part of a response to the initiative in our diocese to encourage more intergenerational church and try and get people to do things together, rather than the more traditional way of the adults stay in the church, the kids go off and do their thing, and then they sort of come back for communion, which is what we do on other Sundays. And because it's quite new and much more informal, we're actually now doing it in our church hall rather than in the church building, because it gives us more space to do things. There's a certain amount of people say, oh, we don't like that kind of thing. It's and it's just needed more time to let it run, to sort of modify it a little bit, and to try and reach out to people who are on the fringe of our church, which is the people we really want to bring in. So we've had to sort of, say, well, don't judge it after 4. Has it brought more people in after 4 months? These things take a lot longer. People don't move quickly to change habits and start coming to church or whatever. So yeah, that's just one sort of example of something that speaks to us.
Yeah, yeah. And discipleship takes even longer, doesn't it? It's, you know, it is a long-term thing, this. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, John. That's really, really interesting. It sounds like a great service.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially makes people twitchy, given that it takes resources to run these things, people, time, you know, all of that investment of time and energy and prayer. So it's a really helpful analogy, the seedling and not pulling it up to check the roots. I hadn't heard that before, but I think there's some good wisdom in there. I think, you know, and so as John, the example you shared was brilliant. Sounds like there's some great things happening there, and in time, you know, you'll be able to celebrate, as we talked about celebrating earlier, celebrating some of the success stories and the glimpses of, you know, the place that you want to, or the things you want to see more of. So you hold them up, that begins to change a culture and get more and more people on board. But yeah, fabulous. Thanks for sharing.
Anyone else? Do just unmute yourself and join in. Oh, Steve, great.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for a brilliant seminar, by the way. Such good stuff here for me to go away and think about. I was just wondering, you know, perhaps it's sort of taken as read, but in our context, I'm a rector of a benefice of 3 churches in semi-rural Oxfordshire, each of which sort of comes from slightly different traditions. And I was just wondering what thoughts were in all of this about the role of preaching strategy, given that it is, you know, it is the word that gives birth to the church. I've been putting a lot of energy, some of it relatively experimental actually, into changing the preaching culture in the church. And I was just wondering what the thoughts were of others in all of these things, as we're talking about discipleship and empowering leadership and all this sort of thing.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's great. Gary, I don't know whether it sounds a bit of a similar context, but just wondered if you had any insights on that or reflections.
I think that's an issue for us, really. How we'd have in our benefice 7 or 8 services a Sunday normally. So trying to resource that is quite a challenge. So we do produce a benefice sermon each week that people can use if they want to, or people are free to preach if they want to and they're allowed to. But I think in our context, what you can achieve on a Sunday is relatively limited. Our focus is kind of getting people together, worshipping, praying, some kind of input to help people grow as a Christian, and how we're going to reach out. And then I think we need to be looking at other ways of helping people grow in their faith. But I think every context different. I guess the key is we've got to finding ways, haven't we, to help people move on. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I do think we have to honour the different cultures of our churches, and that's particularly where you've got a multi-parish benefice. Rather than trying to force different churches into one culture, I think it's helpful to kind of go with the culture of a particular village and the culture of a particular church and work with that. Yeah, that's probably not a very helpful comment, but that's just a few thoughts.
Gary, thanks. We'll come to Paul in a minute. I saw your hand go up just a second ago, Paul. But come back to Steve. You mentioned that you've been trialing different things a little bit with the preaching, or you've changed things. What did that look like?
Well, in terms of encouraging depth of content. So interesting to hear what you were saying, Gary, about honouring the different traditions, and so we're doing that, but trying to up the quality and depth of content, specifically of the preaching. So, you know, in one place you might be preaching, you know, looking like, you know, like I am now, and in another of my churches I'll be rowed up and have a cassock alb and you know, and a chasuble and whatever, but the actual depth of content of the preaching. So I'm trying to build up a preaching team. That's one of the ways in which I'm wanting to empower leadership, because I think leadership and discipleship and growth, good quality preaching is at the center of those things. So I guess the experimental side is simply greater depth than some of our churches would have necessarily been used to. That doesn't mean doubling the length. It means doubling the depth of the content of preaching.
So if you've established a preaching team, presumably your focus and time will be spent investing in that team.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now I've lost the. That was Paul. Have you got a question related to this? Because I see John's hand is up, and I think it's a question related to this topic. Paul, is it a separate question you got or comment?
Just making sure it's the right Paul.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. So I was just ruminating around the differences between trying to get people in terms of into church in terms of as seekers. And what that looks like, and then how you sort of get depth as well, and those don't necessarily easily come in the same service on a Sunday, same moment, but I think that sort of sense of trying to change culture is one of the things that is particularly challenging, where people have got a sense of, well, this is the way we've done church. My church involvement involves turning up on a Sunday, turning up to choir practice, and that's your lot. Thank you very much. Then actually trying to get beyond that to something with depth and meaning that not only enables their own faith, but also points others to the God who they generally care about, but it doesn't necessarily show in huge amounts of life, and that's a rub, that's a challenge, I think. Which is so then we were looking at and trying to debate the merits of sort of cafe church. It's sort of similar thing to John in some sense, I think, possibly in terms of intergenerational type bits and sort of spaces around the room and different ways of engaging there. And recognizing that probably is going to be a challenge to get particular depth into of itself, but it may be something that encourages greater conversation, which then enables sort of small group type things to happen sort of a bit more organically with people who otherwise wouldn't. And so it's where you go with those different things. No question.
Yeah, no, it's they're on. You've got to feel your way, and it sounds like you're doing that, haven't you? You're feeling your way in each context and trying things out and just observing and watching and seeing where the Lord leads, right? And that thought the Making Disciples website, there's some great resources there. The thing that Chris talked about, I thought it's just helpful thinking about these different touch points and how we can move people forward and the next step that they might need to take. Again, something we're looking at in the Leading Evangelism Learning Hub, which people are engaging with. Now we've got a couple of other hands. Just moving on. John, I think your hand went up first. John Castle.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly respond to Steve about preaching and to say, one, fantastic to be bringing in new lay preachers and giving them a chance and encouraging them. That was what we did, and that's made a difference. And people have appreciated it. The congregation have appreciated different people and people who are members, just or lay people, getting up and giving it a go. They've appreciated that, and that's developed the interest. I think. In some churches, people think, oh, the sermon, there's all these jokes about the sermons drive, make people go to sleep and so on. So new people doing it is great. And the other thing is make it relevant. You don't make it long. If people aren't used to long sermons, we keep ours to 10, 15 minutes. But always have some connection with people's lives and what's going on in the world. If you can't relate the gospel truth that you're preaching to people's lives and the world and why it's important, then people kind of will probably, some people will be very interested and others will just switch off. But making it really relevant, I think, can win over people who expect the sermon to be irrelevant and just a whole lot of mumbo jumbo.
Great, John. So what does this mean for me on Wednesday this week, for example? Yeah, it's good applying what we're preaching. So good.
In my workplace, in my school, in my family, the things I'm facing, the worries I have, the world going on. If there's, make some connection.
Excellent, thanks, John. Debbie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of things, just to emphasise the helpfulness of this time tomorrow slot in enabling people to make those connections with church and the rest of life. And secondly, I think intergenerational worship is brilliant, and I don't think we need to worry about it in terms of dumbing down or not helping with people's discipleship, because children can come out with the most profound truths, and just learning from children in intergenerational discussion around or encounter with around scripture and so on, which I've encountered through Messy Church, is really, really powerful. So I don't think it's not just about sermons. It's about how you create that learning environment within your gathered time generally.
Great, Debbie, thanks for sharing that. Any other comments, reflections from people? It's been great to I was really inspired listening to well, in this conversation, but also listening to the speakers as I interviewed them and heard what's going on the ground. It's always just really helpful just to hear what other people are learning, and helps us reflect on our own context. Any other reflections or comments? Okay, well, look, thank you, everyone. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today. And there'll be another webinar in the new year. But yeah, we'll tell you about that in due course. But thanks again for joining us today, and we'll be in touch on an email. See you soon.